Good evening and welcome to Transistance, your weekly news and commentary show dealing with subjects and circumstances from around the world that impact the trans and trans-adjacent community. I'm one of your co-hosts, Genevieve Bergman.
And I am your other co-host, Emily. It's so great to have you all here with us tonight. Despite, some last minute little bit of technical difficulties, we've gone through and revamped this show twice in the last, I think, month and a half. So as to make the whole process better, easier, all of that thing. And yeah, we'll have some technical issues here and there, but we're set now. Let's jump into our first story. A Netherlands study contradicts right-wing claims that trans youth likely to regret treatment. What's going on here?
This is one of probably the most important events to come out of science, probably in the last couple of years, that actually impacts the trans community. This was from the Amsterdam University Medical Center in the Netherlands. They looked at 720 people who had been treated with puberty blockers and then hormones as adolescents, and then looked at, did they continue on with gender affirming care? And what they saw is that most participants who started gender affirming hormones in adolescence continued into adulthood. And that most in the case of this study was 98% of 720 adolescents went on to continue seeking out gender affirming care into their adult lives. Now, this is where right-wing media has tried to totally deflect and say, look, the majority of kids are only in it because it's a fad or it's a trend or it's something like that. And the majority of them give up on gender affirming care. This study completely shatters that myth. This is, in fact, a scientific study that has to be taken seriously because, first of all, it has done a considerable amount of research. So when we're talking about 720 people who were adolescents and then went on to adulthood and seeking gender affirming care, this is one of the most solid studies that we've had come out so far. So this definitely shuts down. Well, it doesn't shut down because the right-wing media doesn't really give a fuck about facts. But this gives us a leverage point to say, look, science is not going to confirm what you're saying as political talking points.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and that's the key issue here, right? You hit on both points of it. One, they don't care about facts. They don't want to alter their story. They have their story and they want to stick with it. And they're, completely anti-science. So there's, whatever science says, they're going to go ahead and ignore anyways.
Right.
On to the next story. Liz Truss has resigned as prime minister after 45 days in office, which means that in less than 2 full months, they've had 3 prime ministers in Great Britain.
This is the nicest thing that's happened to Great Britain. Yes, it does throw that country into chaos because yes, they have had 3 prime ministers. They will have had 3 prime ministers in 1 year. Liz Truss's, 6 weeks as prime minister was racked by just incompetence versus just a failure of policies, ignorance in the part of the secretaries working with the prime minister. So the fact that she, just came right out and said she was done after so short a time tells us that, people had to have been pressuring her because there was a lot of effort by the Conservative Party to get Liz Truss into that position. And then for her to muck it up so badly in 6 weeks proves that the Conservative Party needed to go back and retool. Now, here's what they did first. And this is where the story gets hilariously screwed up because the Conservative Party went back to the went back to the drawing board and said, "Hey, I got a great idea. We got Boris Johnson. He was the previous prime minister who had a no confidence vote. So let's make him prime minister again." Boris Johnson scratched his head for a little bit and said, "Yeah, I could probably do that." Then the next day, he gets hit by the reality ball and says, "No, I don't think I'm going to do that." And Boris Johnson steps out of the running for a return to the prime ministry. So we are looking at a new individual who has been lifted up as the prime minister. Next week, we are going to be talking a little bit more about this individual because there is already noise about this individual and the anti-LGBTQ plus sentiments that he has expressed in his history. So we're going to kind of look back and see. Next week, we'll be looking at him more in depth.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, there. One of the things he was the sort of prime person that was running against Liz when she was running, and so he's been elevated. There was another competitor, and she stepped down to let him have it. Rishi, I can't remember his last name. Does it say it in this article? I know why I'd seen it, but anyways, it's disappointing to hear that he also has a lot of anti-LGBT sentiment because the the bonus thing about him becoming prime minister is he's the first non-white prime minister. He's the first person of Indian descent. He's a third generation. His grandparents immigrated to England, so that was a nice thing to have happen. But we'll see how it goes. I love that Boris Johnson said that he was stepping down because he wasn't going to accept that nomination because he couldn't unite the party, and it's like, well, yeah, duh.
Yeah, when almost all of the political leaders in the House were saying, "We don't think you can do the job worth the shit." Yeah, I think you failed in being able to unite the parties. Yeah.
Yeah, but still, he has to be pretty happy with himself, going like, "Yeah, y'all thought this was super easy, right?"
Oh yeah.
Moving on, a landmark trial begins over Arkansas's ban on trans youth care.
So I've not gotten any of the latest news on this. I don't have the latest updates, but I do know that this is a this is a linchpin court battle. Arkansas was the first state to outlaw gender affirming care for minors. It was a near complete ban on gender affirming care for minors. It did not necessarily rule out therapy, but it did definitely remove uh, puberty blockers and hormone treatment access for those under 18. The first 3 days of the trial involved some of people that we consider some of the heavy hitters for the trans community here in Arkansas, including a 17-year-old trans male, who is phenomenal in being a representative for the community. There was a father whose daughter had decided she was going to end her life because there was just no way that she could go forward. And that father talks about the experience of reading his daughter's suicide letter. Also, one of the doctors who works with trans youth in the Little Rock medical system also was talking, and she talks about she talked about what their process was, how to bring minors into the puberty blocking process, which I think she said it was 11 months before they even begin that process, that they talk for 11 months, then they begin the puberty blockers, and then gender affirming care comes down the road. But she also talked about how when this original bill was it was originally defeated by the governor, but the legislature went back and they overrode the veto. And when that happened, um, this doctor said that 4 of her patients um, reported that they were going to end their lives. And these are the powerful voices of the trans community here in Arkansas, and they're going up in front of this judge, to explain what this law will do to children and youth in Arkansas. So I'm keeping an ear and an eye on this one. I do have people I know, and I can get more up to date information as we go along.
Mhm. Just such a chilling story, a chilling line there of the doctor saying that four of her patients have
Yeah.
threatened self harm over this. And it's just, again, really sad because, like you said, uh, the doctor detailed that it takes 11 months to go through this process to determine if you're viable for taking, HRT or even hormone blockers.
Mhm.
And the right, for some reason, on this issue has gotten into this belief that for some reason, just in the transgender case, that there's no medical discipline whatsoever behind it.
Right.
It's they don't have a problem with surgeons doing brain surgery on kids or heart surgery or these sorts of things, but and they believe in the process there. But here in this case, they for some reason think that there's no rigor, there's no policy or procedure that's in place and followed for trans healthcare. And
Right.
it again is one of those things where it's so hard to rebut that because they're so far from reality to begin with, that how do you contradict that, and how do you get them to listen? The other thing that I'm really curious about, and I'm if you have any insight on this, let me know, is what laws like this are doing to um, puberty blockers in general for kids who have precocious puberty, who start puberty at 6.
Right.
Those sorts of things, because again, the big lie being that puberty blockers is the Wild West. We have no data on it. We have no idea what it does. No, we've been using it for decades to great effect for folks that need it. So,
Right.
do you have any insight into, does this eliminate puberty blockers across the board, like their blanket abortion bans?
No, this
No.
does not block puberty blockers in any other case other than gender affirming care.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where things get very, very, very cherry picking. Um, because at this point, puberty blockers are and have been used for decades for precocious puberty, for people who are well under the age of puberty, who begin typically, if they are uterus owning individuals and they begin menstruation at 8 and 9 years old, puberty blockers have been used to halt that and give that child a few more years to reach the more typical age of puberty. They're still being used for that, as far as I know. But here's the other side of that: they are also being used for the they are being used in extracurricular activities. There are individuals who benefit from not entering puberty
Mm.
and continuing through the development process for a few more years before they begin puberty, where some of those things are halted. And
Are you
those
talking
are
about
not
things like?
those are off diagnosed, off prescription uses. Those are not prescribed for that
Mm,
initially. That's not what the FDA used them for. They were for stopping puberty in the case of precocious puberty, but people found out there was this benefit so that they could eke out a little bit more time for their kid in enhancing their performances in certain ways, and so they would use it for that.
mm.
Now, it's been used that way for decades also. So it's not been prohibited in that use either. It has only been prohibited in the use of gender affirming care.
Does that apply to boys choirs? Is
I
that one of the
It
things you're talking
may.
about?
It really may, but I've not heard of it in the use of boys choirs. But to allow a youth a few more years, or a couple of years of bone growth to give them a little more height, or to allow them to stay thinner, because when people hit puberty, they put on different body fat and
Mm,
musculature that increases their weight. So I can see that in like figure skating. I can see that in gymnastics. I can see that in a few areas where if you can keep those individuals' body weights down, it definitely does improve their athletic performance. And there are no prohibitions against puberty blockers in children's sports, even if it provides an athletic advantage.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just this is all just leads to the thing that we've been saying over and over again. The things that they say about the why and what they're protecting and all that, it's all a lie. The only thing that they're trying to do is erase trans people from existence. That's the only goal here. There's no other there's no other altruistic piece to this.
Well, and the use of puberty blockers and the hypocrisy of claiming that gender affirming care is an invalid use while still recognizing that it still can be used in precocious puberty, as well as not drawing any boundaries against, development enhancement, is the same as the exceptions that are drawn for intersex surgeries.
Yeah.
And Kari made this point to us before we went to air that intersex individuals undergo surgeries against the will of the patient because many times those surgeries are happening before a child is 2 years old.
Mm,
And in some cases, they are done without the knowledge of the parent or through emotional coercion, where they're basically told by the staff, by the doctors, that if this child does not have this procedure, they're going to experience more emotional problems as they develop down the road. So there are in every one of the bills that has ever been written that outlaws gender affirming surgeries, there has always been an exception to allow for the surgery on intersex infants and children. And the practice has been that some of those have been done without parental consent, and all of them are done without the consent of the child.
mhm.
So they're willing to keep their hypocrisy in place and allow for those procedures to create normal children because in their mind being an intersex child is a problem or it is something, it is a defect, and so by correcting that defection in their body they are given a better chance at success in life. And what we've been able to see is that as these children grow their into their puberty, into their adult times, we begin to see them in some cases having serious conflicting issues with the procedure that was done because an arbitrary choice was made on what physical gender representation that child would be given by the doctor.
Yeah. And it totally illuminates the false belief of the right wing and a lot of these doctors that are doing these procedures that the body is the only thing that matters for gender. And we're trying to show no, 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 it's one of the least important factors
Yeah.
in gender.
Yeah.
Back over the pond here, Labor MP Zara Sultana bids good riddance to Suella Braverman, pledges support for trans people. This sounds good. We talked about Braverman before. What's going on in this one?
Suella Braverman was the home secretary under Liz Truss. She was removed from that position less than 6 weeks into her appointment, and she was well known for her anti-trans rhetoric that she spoke about. She was much she was much more aligned with the LGB minus the T movement in Great Britain. And so Suella Braverman, when she stepped out of office, there was more hope that we would get some possibly LGBTQ affirming secretaries into position. Labor Secretary Zara Sultana is was actually speaking at the Pink News Awards, um, and was basically able to give a defense of trans rights. And so we're looking at an individual who is stepping forward in her position as labor secretary and is able to basically come out and say, we're going to do what we can to support the trans community as well as the wider LGBTQ plus community.
That's wonderful to hear. That's
Yeah,
great
it is.
I mean, it's just been such a pendulum swinging over there in the UK, right? Where Boris Johnson's bad and he's out, and then oh wait, no, but Liz Truss is worse, and then
Yeah.
Liz Truss is out, but then there's still these people. It's like so, so much bad and good going on over there. I'm
Yeah.
hoping that the pendulum swings and stays more on the good side for a bit here.
Yeah, the UK is in chaos right now. That is not just at the political level, it's also at the economic level, and it is also at the societal level amongst culture.
All right, we'll see what this is in this headline. Chilliwack elects transgender man to school board, known for anti-SOGI controversy. Where's Chilliwack, and what's the anti-SOGI acronym?
So Chilliwack is in British Columbia. Um, and it is it is just a small community in British Columbia. Um, Terry Westerby is the first trans man elected to a school board in Canada. And it just so happened to be in this community that was known for denouncing sexual orientation and gender identity programs in British Columbian schools. So that's the SOGI, sexual orientation and gender identity. And this is going to be um, this is going to be a step forward for this little community. Hopefully, we will see that begin to, take hold and influence and change the community around it. But Westerby said that talking to the people in the community while working with the Gender Support Network in Chilliwack and the Chilliwack Pride Society motivated him to run for this school board position. He said, what I found was that children were crying out for representation and for someone to listen to them and to their families to make sure that Chilliwack School Board has someone who recognizes that every student has human rights. So big step, huge step in a small community that would definitely be against the greater, um, you know, tradition of what that community has seen.
Mhm. All right, so the House GOP introduces bill cutting federal funds for sexually oriented events for kids. What's going on here?
This is bad. We have been talking about the advancing of what the bills that we have seen at the state level to the federal level. This is the first one that has been officially submitted. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene has tossed out some, you know, suggestions for one. This is the first one that's actually been kind of floated that has some teeth to it. Mike Johnson is a representative from Louisiana and has submitted this bill with more than 30 Republican House of Representatives signed on as co-sponsors. That means that, and I think the number is 33 co-sponsors. So 34 representatives in the House of Representatives have signed on to this bill saying that sexually oriented material needs to be kept out of the hands of 10-year-old and younger. Now, the bill is titled Stop the Sexualization of Children Act. And I know everybody's saying 10-year-olds. Yeah, we don't want 10-year-olds exposed to sexually oriented material. The thing is that when we begin to dig into the bill and we begin to look at what this bill actually says, it's very important to read the fine details on this. Because when we get over to the definition of sexually oriented, all right, hang on just a second. Let me pull up. I want to read this, verbatim. I don't want it to be, quoted, misquoting anything. Sexually oriented material is defined as any depiction, description, or simulation of sexual activity, any lewd or lascivious depiction or description of human genitals, or any topic involving gender identity, gender dysphoria, transgenderism, sexual orientation, or related subjects. So the sexually oriented material is now being broadened at a federal level to include gender identity, gender dysphoria, and anything related to transgender experience. Now, sexual orientation, we've been seeing this, but they have covered the entire spectrum of what gender identity, gender dysphoria, which is a medically recognized condition, but and the full experience of transgender experience. They like to use the word transgenderism. That is only appropriate within an academic setting. It's only appropriate within academic writing. It's not appropriate at the popular or cultural level because we are talking about people, transgender people. So this bill would essentially create a law that says any entity that receives federal funds or federal support cannot in any way expose children 10 years and under to anything dealing with transgender people, sexual orientation, or related subjects. And that right there is a dangerous phrase. The idea of related subjects is broad, it's vague, it is amorphous, it can be used to include anything.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at this bill, this is, first of all, it's a bad bill. It's badly written. The first part of this bill's intent is to essentially keep drag and burlesque out of the presence of 10-year-old and under. And I know, Emily, you and I have a difference of perspective on this, but the front of the bill is about the description of this bill is always about drag and burlesque performances. But at the end of the bill, what they came back and did is they rewrote the entirety of the bill by including in the definition of sexually oriented
Yeah.
to include transgender people in any way, shape, or form.
So yeah, it sounds like if you're an organization that receives federal funding of any kind, you're in jeopardy of losing that if on your website you mention transgender people or dysphoria or things like that. And that's again what they're trying to do. That is an erasure of the existence of trans people and making it illegal to even talk about it.
Exactly.
If there's a chance that it's public, if there's a chance that young people could see it, and there isn't anything further than sexually explicit than talking about gender dysphoria, but whatever.
When you create a class of people and designate them as sexually oriented individuals, that is the ultimate form of government sanctioned fetishization.
Oh,
The presence of a transgender person being sexually oriented material is the fetishization of all transgender people in every setting and in every way.
have you gotten a chance to read into what the opposition says about this bill and how strong that is?
I have not read anything, but I, it's one of the. I have read what commenters, are saying, and they're looking at how wide the implication is of this, in that any inclusion of a transgender person. Now, here's what I would say: if you have a library that accepts federal funds and they have a transgender librarian, the the parents of that community, of that 10-year-old child, can sue the library.
Oh, it's another one of those lawsuit bills. My
It is a
God, can we
lawsuit
just?
bill. It is an economic leverage bill. It is the idea that if you hire transgender people, if you have a transgender teacher, if you have anyone who is in the office as a transgender person, and that there is a chance that that person can come in contact with a 10-year-old child, then the people, the guardians of that child can sue that institution, that entity, for the exposure to sexually oriented material, which happened to be a person doing their goddamn fucking job.
That's just absolute insanity. I don't. Wow. Wow. I just I want to move on, but I don't think we have any other like positive things going on for a minute here in the show. But let's just go ahead and pound through some of these. Let's go talk about some Marjorie Taylor and Green and friends. First up, we got Ted Cruz, who was mocked relentlessly for sharing fake article about LGBTQ people and is refusing to apologize.
Yeah, so Ted Boy doesn't like to be pointed out as wrong, even though that does seem to be in his job description currently. Um, Ted Cruz tweeted a story with a fake headline that said the evolution of white supremacy and the subheading of in Dearborn, Michigan, Muslim parents who oppose teaching pornography to children become the new face of the far right. Now, we covered this story last week where there was I believe it was a school board meeting that there was an outcry against the inclusion of LGBTQ plus materials in a library, and the majority of the people who were protesting did happen to be Muslim. But they are not the new face of the far right. And the implication of that is so fucked up, y'all. Because 20 years ago, the far right wanted to exterminate every Muslim off of the face of the earth. And they pointed out Dearborn, Michigan, time and time again as a Muslim conclave within the United States borders. And now Ted Cruz wants to come out and say, oh, yeah, this is the face of the new right. Well, people are like, they came after him and basically said, you are kidding me. You are a fool. To think that this is what has happened is so ignorant. And people were just dragging him left and right to basically show him that, there's no way that this could be the reality of the new far right. Ted instead doubles down and says, well, it is what it is. Basically, he just washes his hands of it and says, you know what? I'm going to stand by what I said.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
Yeah,
the
I
really
love a man who has the integrity that when he's really fucking wrong, he stands by it.
mm-hmm. That's why they love Trump so much. Um,
Exactly.
the key problem with this, I mean, the the different problem, there's the lies and all of that, and we're unfortunately getting used to that from the
Mm-hmm.
right. The arguments they make are just out and out lies. The problem is it was a photoshopped article, and it included the author from the real pieces.
Right.
And so Abby Olheiser has gotten groomer, been called groomer, and probably gotten worse threats, because whoever photoshopped this included her name on there,
Yeah.
in this. Sorry, I don't know their pronouns. I shouldn't say her. Just assuming off of the name Abby, but so they're getting dragged by the right, for something that they didn't say, that they didn't post, is not a real article.
Right.
So not only are we all as a community victims to this, there is a direct person who is a victim to this. And talk about the laws where you should be able to sue somebody. She should be able to sue the ever loving crap out of Ted for this one.
Well, that only gets worse with the next one.
Let's jump right in. We're still with Ted. He shared the name of a trans preschool teacher on Twitter to his 5.3 million followers. What was the backlash to that?
Well, the backlash essentially is that any potential doxing of anyone by a United States public official, you know, needs to be noticed. It needs to be taken into attention because if any harm comes to an individual because of what a United States representative or senator or president or vice president or secretary of agriculture or secretary of the interior, anybody who is a representative of the United States government and or the United States and its people, that needs to be called out immediately. Ted Cruz invaded the privacy of a pregnant preschool teacher by exposing his name on social media. Cruz had quote tweeted a tweet from an activist, conservative activist, that included screenshots of an email from a Washington, D.C. preschool outlining how parents should discuss a trans teacher's pregnancy with students. The individual, the activist, who had over 100,000 followers, included screenshots that mentioned both the name of the school and the teacher. That's bad. But then Ted Cruz went around and shared that post, and his following is 5.3 million followers. Now, the original post that was doxing has been deleted, but those great people at the Washington Examiner and Citizen Free Press and the National Desk, they got the story and they spread that teacher's name farther and wider than just what Ted Cruz did. Now, the Ted Cruz's tweet, which is still up, doesn't include the name of the teacher or the school, but the damage has been done because Ted Cruz exposed a private citizen, their name and their occupation, where they work, to a group of people who are known to be very militantly anti-LGBTQ, and now open that individual up to harassment or possibly violence. How do we know this? Because this is the same kind of crowd that goes out and shuts down a library. This is the same kind of crowd that goes out and they shut down a pride event. This is the same kind of crowd that goes to a library and says, you're not going to have this event that is going to help trans kids because we don't want you to be exposing kids to that. So this is, these are the same people. So to say that Ted Cruz instrumentally put the personal information of a transgender person on the internet and thereby created an event where that person could be harassed or experience violence, that is not unrealistic. It is not hyperbole. It is not made up. This is what happens.
Mm-hmm. And this is a case where a politician should be censured and should not be allowed to continue in office or run again. That is a massive violation of the rights of an individual citizen. And yeah, that shouldn't, we should not stand for that in this country.
Well, let's go one step further. Twitter has anti-doxing rules.
Mm-hmm.
Twitter should pull that account and can him.
Yeah.
He cannot use Twitter. If he is going to dox a private individual who is not doing anything other than trying to work with their institution, then he deserves to have his account pulled.
Mm-hmm.
Let him go over there to Truth Social and suck up to the Trumplicans because that's not cool.
No. Let's move on to the ringleader of our little band here. Marjorie Taylor Greene wants the FBI to investigate mother of trans child for child sex abuse. Just now repeating what has been going on in Greg Abbott's Texas.
This one gets a little more graphic. So I'm going to put a content warning on this. First of all, because it's Marjorie Taylor Greene and she should have her own content warning. But secondly, there are some issues of a sexually explicit nature that may cover little innocent ears. Okay. Green tweeted as she shared a thread from an anti-transgender account called Fourth Wave Now from a group called Parents of Transgender Children. The thread was allegedly started by a sex positive, open, communicative, supportive mama who is looking into other alternatives for her 15-year-old transgender daughter to pleasure herself with. Now, the original poster of that comment thought that perhaps some type of stimulation for the anal entry might be possible. But the conversation, we're not sure if this was legitimate. We're not sure if this was a legitimate poster, if this was some kind of setup, because we do know that places like um, Reddit and the place that got shut down a few weeks back, we do know that they will organize and that they will do, these type of activities where they will falsely post things in order to start um, a potential smear campaign. And we have seen that Marjorie Taylor Greene has no capacity to fact check a goddamn thing because one, she's just too damn lazy to get the job done. But two, she doesn't care. But Green has, basically called this out and says that this person needs to be investigated for child sex abuse, for suggesting that their 15-year-old should be able to pleasure herself and wanting to find some assistance with that.
Well, yeah, in the post by the mother, the child has approached her saying that the means to pleasure herself available to her cause a great deal of dysphoria because she is a trans female. She was born with the bits she was, but she's been on puberty blockers and HRT. Um, but she wants to take care of business as a teen with hormones running through them, running wild, doing the typical hormone thing. And so Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to label this mother wanting to help a child that has approached her as child abuse. And it's they're so afraid of sex and sexuality that they want to label everything as bad and demonize the people that have anything to do with it, including helping kids. And it's just so ridiculous.
And as an educator who does deal with the subject of sex and sexuality, if this parent was a legitimate concerned parent wanting information from other parents, I applaud her because, quite frankly, having an open, honest communication pattern with your teen children about their sexual proclivities keeps those kids from experimenting in dangerous ways with things that they're not quite educated with because they do not get the same type of education that is available to adults. Most of the information that they get is from their peers, and their peers have gotten it from the internet. So,
or you just get into experimenting with other random things, and it's not good. I'll tell you from experience, it's not good to just to try whatever.
I agree, and that knowledge is incomplete at best, and yeah, harm can be done. So, for me, I'm looking at this mother and I'm saying, yay, good for her. I am so glad that she has that relationship with her daughter.
That line, harm can be done, that just seems like the tagline for Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think that's That's Marjorie Taylor Greene's subtitle. I love it.
Yeah, and Rosa, you're right. You know, being able to teach sex education so that teens are not shamed by the fact that they are a sexual being.
Hmm.
Um, you know, creating a space to let them know that, look, your body was designed for this. Your body was designed for pleasure. Your body was designed to experience these things. Yes, you're going to want to experiment with them. I want to do that safely.
Hmm. Is there any topic less Christian than removing the shame from sex and our bodies?
We'll have to talk about that later.
Because that seems like their entire point.
Which, by the way, allow me a moment of personal privilege here, Emily. You can call this, your commercial break, but I'm actually going to be doing an online workshop talking about leaving purity culture behind and essentially discussing how a person with a Christian faith can have a fulfilling sex life and being able to talk about how to move away from that shame. Now,
Mhm.
that's not in any way, shape, or form connected to the transverse, but it does dovetail from that conversation that I am at least doing what I can to hopefully change the direction of that.
That's great. Continuing on with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I love the image for this headline because the people in the background are just cartoons. But Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to honor the Confederacy, but failed spectacularly. How did she accomplish this? We know she has the ability, but how did she actually accomplish this?
Okay, so Marjorie was at Wilder Monument in Chickamauga, Georgia, and decided to take a moment to, you know, let everybody know how proud she was to be, the American that she is. Tonight, I stopped at the Wilder Mountain in Chickamauga, Georgia, which honors the Confederate soldiers of the Wilder Brigade. Now, this was on Social, which is Donald Trump's spinoff of Twitter. She says, I will always defend our nation's history. Um, the thing is that the Wilder Brigade was made up of Union soldiers, not Confederate soldiers. And those soldiers were from Indiana and Illinois. They had fought in the Battle of Chickamauga in northwestern Georgia. And in 1890, some of the officers from the brigade started discussing a monument at the battlefield to honor the Union General John T. Wilder. Um, so essentially, Marjorie went out there to, okay, first of all, as a proud American, to honor the Confederate soldiers who fought at Chickamauga, which, if you remember correctly, the Confederate soldiers were fighting against the United States of America. They had seceded from the United States of America. They were no longer United States citizens.
Mm-hmm.
They were
And they didn't want to
Confederate
be United
states.
States citizens. It wasn't about trying to be United States citizens. It was about trying to break free and do your own thing. That is exactly the opposite of patriotism. In every way,
Exactly.
that's exactly the opposite. It's the antithesis. And oh my God, it's so great to see her get dragged on this.
It
Um,
doesn't matter. The woman has a Teflon ego. She
mhm.
can get dragged from here to Chickamauga and back, and she is still going to get up and dust off her little MAGA shirt. Which, by the way, there's noise that Marjorie Taylor Greene is a potential running mate for the fantasy campaign of Donald Trump for 2024.
All right. A third Marjorie Taylor article, and then we're off of her for a bit. She says she supports January 6th rioters because trans kids have rights. What's the mental gymnastics that are happening here?
So, Marcus Flowers, who is campaigning against Marjorie Taylor Greene, wanted to question her about her support of those who were a part of the insurrection. Now, Green wanted to get it across that she was a victim of the riots and that she was opposed to prosecuting the anti-democratic mob because the government is doing its job. So when Flowers asked her why she was supporting the insurrectionists more than the people of her district, this is where she kind of got a little off the track. She said she opposes a two-tier justice system. She said, I will not stand by and watch Merrick Garland turn the Department of Justice into a political weapon and the FBI sending in, after parents addressing their school boards, people who walked in the Capitol and have been held in jail for nearly 2 years, while groups like Antifa and BLM rioters go free and never get held accountable. You cannot accuse me of insurrection. I was a victim of the January 6th riot just as much as any other member of Congress. That was the third day I had on the job. I had nothing to do with what happened there that day, and I will not have you accuse me of that. But then you have to read the subtext of that, because the Justice Department is being accused of trampling on the rights of individuals because the Justice Department said that it was going to investigate people who threaten or kill or harm school board members. And they claim that the Justice Department was trampling on free speech rights for people protesting mask mandates, critical history, and transgender equality. So essentially what she was saying is that, look, I will not stand by and watch the Justice Department be turned into a political battering ram to smash into the ever-given, God-given rights of free speech for people who want to basically threaten school board members who would try to include all kids in their school. But by God, those insurrectionists, they deserve to get a chance, you know? The government's doing what it's supposed to be doing. They're giving them a chance.
The Marjorie Taylor Greene basically mirror person, or just like an offshoot, just another one, just the other one. Lauren Boebert calls trans kids butchered children, while new poll shows her losing the midterm.
So, first of all, Lauren Boebert made a very blatant accusation that really demands for her to be criticized by more people. She tweeted, the US market for gender transition surgeries was approximately $2 billion in 2021 and should grow to $5 billion by the decade's end. Now, she then makes this claim that the $2 billion that was spent on gender transition surgeries was on children. That there was $2 billion spent on gender surgeries for children, because in her next statement, she says that means $3 billion more in butchered children in the next 8 years.
So she's making the claim that all transition surgeries now are done on kids.
Yes.
That's just a whole lot of wow. Oh my God.
Now, then she comes along and she says, still don't think the left has an agenda? Follow the money. Well, it's like, sweetie, when you don't even follow the money, why the hell should anybody else?
We can't even follow the logic. How can we follow the money? What's she saying in this next one? Oh no, it's not her. It's a different lawmaker that faces backlash for proposed bill to protect LGBTQ children from abusive parents.
This one is this one is very complex and nuanced
Hmm.
because it's really hard to see both the positive and the negative and try to come down solid on one side of this. So, Virginia State Delegate Elizabeth Guzman wanted to introduce this bill, and it was in response to Governor Youngkin's, moral education policy that would block transgender students from protections in school. The legislation would expand the state's definition of child abuse to include inflicting physical or mental injury on the basis of the child's gender identity or sexual orientation.
Okay.
But it was characterized as criminalizing parents who do not affirm their child's gender identity or sexual orientation. So the conservative media got on this and basically said this is just a bill to outlaw parents who reject transgender kids. And it basically criminalizes those individuals. But the back and forth on this has been, pretty much it's been bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans have criticized this proposed bill because the language of it was it's an overreach in language. So
Mhm.
this is tough. Okay, this is hard. Um, this is a tough fight. I can see where she's coming from, but at the
Yeah.
same time, this has been influenced by conservative media to be blown completely out of proportion.
Well, yeah, and the thing is we've got to remember that for the laws that go into effect in our land, we need them to be written well. We need them to be realistic and not only realistic to the needs, but also to like what is actually happening, what can be done, those sorts of things. So if a bill that is positive for us for the most part has a lot of that overreaching language, oversimplifies things, and leaves things really vague where a lot of stuff can be interpreted, then it's a bad bill and we need to look at it and rewrite it.
Yeah,
You can't push, you can't fight for positive legislation when the legislation isn't written well. Like, we still need it
yeah,
to be written well.
right.
A fifth grade teacher told students to call a classmate an anti-gay slur. Wow.
So this happened at Tallahena Public Schools in Tallahena, Oklahoma. Um, Parents Amber and Jonathan Stepp said that their son's teacher told students to call the 11-year-old boy an anti gay slur when he was horseplaying with another boy. Um, according to the mother, two of the boys were wrestling with each other, and one of them started yelling, "He's touching me! He's touching me!" And the teacher said, "Yeah, when he does that, you need to say F slur alert." Now, these are 11-year-olds. These are 11-year-olds who are being taught to shame another individual just because there is physical contact. Now, we're not told what kind of contact there was. They were wrestling, they were being boys
Hmm.
for the most part. And as boys, they are going to get into those places where, they get physical. That's just what boys have done throughout history. But to have a teacher tell those boys that they need to begin to use an F slur when physical contact becomes an issue, that's beyond reprehensible.
Yeah, and the thing is there is room there for a boundaries conversation. Like, I don't want you touching me there. Like, setting boundaries. There is a healthy way to address this.
Yeah.
Is but shaming and saying that any kind of this touching is a gay thing. Again, the implication here is that gay is bad. That's the
Yeah.
subtext here. We got to, make sure that we're aware of,
Oh
is
yeah.
that the implication is that being gay is bad, and that's how you get someone to stop, is to shame them for doing something gay, and there's just nothing right about that.
No.
Republicans in Idaho are trying to ban drag performances entirely. What is going on here?
So the Idaho Family Policy Center is an organization that just sprung up out of nowhere in 2021. And the thing is that their entire purpose is to get rid of transgender, LGBTQ, abortion, any kind of critical race or other forms of broad, broad teaching basis. Um, but what they did is they brought legislation to the legislators, and this is how they work. It is a policy group. They write this shit. They give it to the legislators who are friendly to them, and the legislators brought it forward, which basically would say that drag performances would be banned in all of the state's public spaces. Um, Basically, the Idaho Family Policy Center said that drag performance represents a sexualized representation of gender. He compared it to the racist practice of blackface. You overemphasize certain natural characteristics so much that it becomes a caricature of itself. And so, really what they want to do is they want to um, um, push drag out of public space and put it into a position where it is no longer accessible.
Hmm, interesting. A body cam video shows Florida deputy choking unarmed trans woman during arrest.
So this is almost 2 years old. The
Hmm.
actual incident happened 2 years ago, but recent body cam footage that has been released has now called the incident back into question. 2 years ago, a Florida sheriff's department arrested and charged um, a transgender woman with battery and resisting an officer. The department said that Jenny DeLeon knocked a deputy off balance during a fight in November of 2020. What body camera footage shows, though, is the deputy choked and slammed Jenny DeLeon to the ground. Other deputies who arrived at the scene then shackled DeLeon while pinning her to the ground. Um, Almost exactly 1 year after the arrest, DeLeon was fatally stabbed. Um, a suspect was eventually arrested in that murder case. But now there's a question of going back and looking at how did the sheriff's department handle this inappropriately? Is there any wrongdoing that was done? And should this be, brought to a, you know, form of, reprimand or retraining or something like that? But when the body cam footage is released and it shows that it was not just, a simple matter of, you know, an altercation, but there was much more to this. What it shows is DeLeon greets the deputy with a fist bump and then asks him why he is there. DeLeon turns around and asks people nearby if they had called the deputy to the home. Bush, the deputy, asks DeLeon to have a seat, but she responds that he is on her property. DeLeon asks the deputy to return to his car, saying no one called him to the home. Um, before asking him to come back, but to give her 6 feet of space due to Corona. Um, she gives the officer a second fist bump, compliments him. Bush then steps in the direction of a vehicle parked outside the house, and DeLeon raises her arm and asks him not to touch the vehicle because of coronavirus. Bush says, "Don't touch me," and takes DeLeon to the ground, grabbing her arm, shirt, and neck. DeLeon tries to get up, but the deputy grabs her by the neck again, pulls out his stun gun, and DeLeon repeatedly shouts, "I'm epileptic," as the deputy deploys the stun gun on her.
Oh, Jesus.
This continued to go on where basically she was pushed down, hit a couple more times with the stun gun, eventually put within restraints. So, yeah, this, again, she is no longer with us due to a separate incident. But at the same time, this is something that it needs to be looked into to see if this deputy needs to be reprimanded or if more training needs to be deployed among that sheriff's department.
Do you have a record of when she passed away?
Let me take a look at that real quick. I'll come right back to you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering if she's somebody that we'll be talking about at our Trans Day Remembrance event in November.
No, that was in 2021.
Okay. Florida
almost
okays
1 year after the incident in 2020.
Mm-hmm. It's tragic when we lose anybody from the community. Florida okays sweeping anti-LGBT rules in schools after Don't Say Gay. So the Don't Say Gay flood is continuing there in Florida.
So what has happened here is the Don't Say Gay bill was promoted as, this is not a Don't Say Gay bill. This is a don't teach certain things in certain grades bill. Now the the Florida Board of Education, has come back and adopted more rules on top of that bill. And basically, it requires public and charter schools to notify parents by mail and post online if they allow students to use restrooms and changing rooms. Now, this is just a matter of, publicly disclosing that there are trans students in that school. That is all that does. The second thing is that they are putting in place that if a teacher in any way speaks about these prohibited subjects, they can be fired and lose their teaching certificate. Censuring them all the way out to, them losing their ability to teach in the school system. So, I mean, this is tough. This is actually going after teachers and saying, you no longer have any security. You no longer have any backing from the school board, that if you cross a line in this way, your speech is not guaranteed free, and therefore you can lose not only your job, but your teaching certificate, so you could not teach in Florida anymore. So, wow. It sucks.
Let's see. Am I still echoing? Yeah. Kari, can you mute me in scene, please? All right. Former Miss USA contestant says pro LGBTQ plus school board should be jailed.
Carrie Progene Bowler said that a queer Halloween event that was upcoming um, was disgusting. And the event should have every single one of the school board members um, called out for what they are. They're groomers. And in a normal world, they would be criminalized, they would be put in jail. Um, this event called the Boo Bash is in San Diego, and it's a Halloween party hosted by Trans Family Support Service. Um, Initially, it seemed to be endorsed by the Encinitas Union School District, but they have since come out and separated themselves from any sponsoring of that event. So it's just a question now of if they're doing that or not. But the event was supposed to be a time of games, trick or treating, a costume contest, a family friendly Disney villain themed drag show, which has already caused problems in some places.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but, for first of all, for a celebrity to come out and act as if they are an expert in law is absurd. But for them to then go on and say, that every one of these school board members are essentially sexual groomers and therefore they should be jailed, that just shows the ignorance that this person possessed in opening her mouth without realizing the damage she could cause.
That is so interesting. A Miss America contestant who is not very intelligent. That's strange.
Oh, damn the shade, Emily. Oh my God.
Those are always some of the best fail videos, right? When the the beauty pageant contestants are asked political questions or whatever, and you get some of the best quotes there. Moving on, before I get in too much trouble, trans politician left violated in quotes after bigot grills her on genitals. Transphobia is a disease, she says. What's going on here?
Emilia Decodine is a district leader and state committee member from Queens in New York City. And she was at a sports bar when a woman approached her and asked her um, about her role as a female district leader. So this is an unpaid elected position. And each district has a male and a female leader. So originally Decadian was, unperturbed and, explaining that she often gets, from people this kind of inquiry. But the tone shifted when the woman asks, "How can you represent vaginas?" And so, that's pretty much a really good clarification of where this conversation is going pretty damn quick. She responded to the woman by saying, "Well, how do you know what's in my pants?" It's kind of a weird question to ask. In turn, the woman began arguing that trans politicians couldn't represent her. Um, the woman ended her tirade by pointing at her young children and questioning how the representative could represent these vaginas before leaving the bar.
Oh, they were in a bar. Okay, great.
Uh-huh. Yeah. She was at a sports bar, just chilling, having dinner with her partner. This woman casually approaches her with her daughters, young daughters, is what the article says. And
proceeds to reduce them to just vaginas. I think that's just, I
yeah,
mean, it's beyond the pale.
and I'm just glad, that somebody is finally, showing the definition of what sexualizing children looks like.
Uh-huh. Whew. McDonald's security guard asks trans woman to prove she's female to use the women's toilet.
So this is over in London, in Peckham, London, and Paula Griffin was in McDonald's when she was approached by a male security guard who followed her into the toilets, then shouted something and demanded to see her passport when she came out. Now, she produced her passport, which says that she is female. Um, now, I have comments, I have questions, I have a lot of things, but first of all, I want to know this. What kind of fucking McDonald's do you have where you need to have a security guard? I mean, it's two all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onion on a sesame seed bun. It ain't fucking Fort Knox. So why do you have a security guard in a McDonald's? Second of all, why does said security guard have the authority to follow a random woman into the restroom?
And he was a male security guard too. That should be a violation right there. Like,
Yeah. And third, and most importantly, what the fuck does it matter? Because this guy was judging her based on her appearance.
mm-hmm.
And based upon that appearance, he decided she was not feminine looking enough.
And here we go with the gatekeeping of what femininity is and the trouble that's going to come to cis women from all of this horrible, horrible uh, idealism from conservatives.
Yeah.
It's going to get much worse before it gets better.
Here's
It's
the
interesting
thing.
that this is actually a trans woman that this happened to, but we've talked about some stories where similar things have happened to cis women.
And for me, look, I am a huge proponent of the philosophy of choices and consequences. You know, that's what I live with. I chose to live my life publicly and outwardly as a transgender woman. I accept the consequences of that. That means one, I get euphoria when I'm looking fucking hot, you know? Secondly, I accept that I'm constantly going to be ridiculed or mocked or somehow invalidated or diminished by people who are too small minded to give a rip.
Mm-hmm.
But when feminists go to the point of saying transgender women cannot be allowed into women's spaces, and the only criteria that they have to determine that is only based upon appearance, then when transgender women are no longer a threat to cisgender women's spaces, what are they going to do with cisgender women who don't pass the criteria of femininity?
Mm-hmm.
They have set the feminist movement back 200 years. And they are going to be looking at a self-imploding system where they can no longer be able to call themselves feminists because they will have set a gatekeeping standard within their own movement that says certain women cannot be a part of this because they don't look womanly enough.
Let's move on to another equally ridiculous story. Enraged conservative parents storm school board meeting over satanic student mural. Wait till you hear what it is that they determine is satanic.
So 80 to 100 people attended a school board meeting in Grant, Michigan to complain about a painting done by a student. And the problem with this painting is that it included certain elements that conservative and conservative Christian individuals felt were crossing a line into pure evil. It is a mural. It's based upon a mural that was done by Evelyn Gonzalez, and it had been painted over the summer. The mural shows kids and animals wearing Red Cross hats. The kids have diverse skin colors. One is wearing a hijab. One girl in the mural is wearing rainbow colors. Another student is wearing a transgender flag shirt um, while getting a shot from a bunny nurse. And two kids are wearing bisexual pride flag colors. In the background, there are symbols like letters, stars, a peace sign, a mushroom, butterflies, uh, the Hamsa hand, also known as the hand of Fatima, which is a symbol of good luck in Northern African and Middle Eastern and Latin American cultures. And Evelyn just said, I put my art up there to make people feel welcome. But adult Nate Thompson said that the mural discriminated against Christians and that it was hate material. We and our administration should embrace that and get all of this hate material out of our schools because it is hate material. Another mother, Tracy Hargreaves, said, I'm a conservative, right wing, gun loving American, and I've never seen more bigoted people in my life. And she's talking about the conservative people who showed up to protest against the mural.
Hmm.
So basically, this thing devolved into just people going back and forth, back and forth. The student who painted the mural tried to explain to herself, but was not listened to.
Big surprise.
Some people were saying it was demonic. Others said that it was witchcraft. Um, Other adults objected to another symbol, that of a video game character that they said was a demon. Um,
Yeah, so basically there's the foreground in the mural of the kids doing the things, and two of them appear to be flying. The one with the hijab, and then a girl with a superhero cape and the typical mask on. And it's all just very cute, typical kid stuff, right? But then there's these background symbols which apparently weren't in the initial design, that were added to fill in space later, and one of them is this video game character that has horns and tusks, and thus is the target of the the satanic claims. But yeah, that's just a level of crazy that is so shocking to see now, when a symbol, someone creates a symbol of inclusivity and acceptance of everyone, and people just go nuts on it like this. A newly elected school board member wants all LGBTQ plus symbols removed. What's going on here? Where's this one at?
so this is Mount Juliet, Tennessee. Wilson County has a newly elected school board member named Joseph Padilla. And, or since it's Tennessee, it could be Joseph Padilla. I don't know. But he said he wants to create a school policy that arose out of concerns brought to him by parents. And these parents said that LGBTQ flags or stickers should not be in classrooms. So Padilla said, this isn't Joe's opinion. This is Wilson County's opinion. They elected me, and when I spoke with them, a lot of them had problem using taxpayers' money, their money, for a building we're displaying things that they feel shouldn't be there. A lot of parents feel that society is over-sexualizing anything as it is, and they feel the school should be the sanctuary that doesn't have any of that stuff in it. It should be about geometry or history or English. Padilla said he also feels
nothing for
those.
actual living in this life.
Padilla also said he feels those symbols don't belong in a classroom where there should be uniformity. I feel that each class should be an equalizer for all students, and we shouldn't promote one group in front of another. It should be somewhere they go to learn and don't have to look at something they may not agree with, that lifestyle. I don't think there shouldn't be, I think that there shouldn't be extra hurdles in front of a child seeking a public health resource, says Aaron Moore, a parent with children in the school district. and has a child in the LGBTQ community. Moore said the stickers are a health resource to help LGBTQ students who could be dealing with things like depression or other issues. Padilla wants stuff moved to the halls, just not in the classroom. Um, Padilla also suggested a different type of neutral safe space sticker. Not everyone is a safe space, and not everyone can be a safe space. It's not that they're not good teachers. It's not that they're not good people, but they are not that resource. And to put that kind of sticker when they're not going to be a safe space for a child in need is dangerous.
I agree with that. Because
So
the teacher's gonna be a bigoted jerk, you know.
So here's the thing. I'm all for allowing the removal of LGBTQ stickers, flags, images, any of that. But with it has to go every form of religious symbol, every mention of religious practice, every form of any kind of an indoctrinated societal group. Because the moment you take one away, saying that it is segregating or it is differentiating, and yet you have an entire Christian community influencing the school saying, we want our influence in this school to make sure that our Christian ideals and principles are observed. That right there is where this stops.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Well, it
if
almost
there
seems
is
like
one group of people who creates more division, more than Christianity, I've not yet found them.
well, it almost seems like with if you take the letter of what he's saying, that people should respond with proposing non-gendered school uniforms
Mm-hmm.
and gender-neutral bathrooms and changing spaces. Like
Mm-hmm.
if it's just a uniformity kind of a thing, everybody is the same, no differences, then you're talking erasing gender entirely. Then just
Yeah.
have everything be androgynous and gender neutral. If
Yeah.
you know.
And I had this person who just popped into my chat and said, they already took the Bible out of schools years ago. Where have you been? Well, I've been in schools where they have Bible as literature classes. I've been in schools where they have the See You at the Pole and the National Day of Prayer events. I've been in schools where they still have moments of prayer. And I've been in schools where there has been Christian teachers doing Christian theology in a class. Don't tell me the Bible is out of the schools, because the Bible has just been ingrained into the teachers who have become the indoctrinators of these issues.
Well, unless we forget the Pledge of Allegiance, which says one nation under God.
Exactly.
Christian medical provider sues for the right to misgender and refuse care to trans patients. This old trope again. Is this a follow-up on one of our existing stories?
No, this is a new issue because it's rising out of the University of Michigan health system. Valerie Klusterman is a Christian physician assistant, and she claims that she deserves a religious exemption from hospital practices and said that she was called evil for refusing to provide medical care. What she wants to be able to do is refuse to provide care to transgender people and does not want to use the gender pronouns that they have. So she wants to basically discriminate against these individuals who are coming to her for health care.
Again, social service. You shouldn't be able to claim religious exemption if you're working in a social service.
And she's taking the high road of saying she's doing them a favor. She said that identifying patients by their chosen gender identity could cause them to miss important health screenings or receive improper medication or care. So basically what she's saying is that She is there to advocate for these people, yet she does not want to advocate for them. She wants to advocate for her idea of them.
Hmm. Yeah, there's nothing in this that says that by addressing somebody by their name or their pronouns, you ignore the fact of their biology. It would seem very, very shoddy doctor practice, medical practice, to ignore someone's actual biology in diagnosing and addressing their issues. Just saying.
Yeah.
Facebook and Instagram are making money off of ads calling LGBTQ people groomers, despite a policy that opposes that. What's going on here?
So Meta, which is the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, um, said that it has policies which prohibit the use of the term groomer to refer to LGBTQ people. But it has continued to make money off of ads that are using the slur. So as they continue to display these ads, which are typically going to be conservative or some sort of propaganda machine that creates them, um, as they are generating those ads, they are receiving the money off of those. On September 6th, Media Matters told Meta that about 134 ads used the slur groomer. Meta removed only 40 of those ads. Now, Media Matters has discovered 19 more ads that have been added since then. And the advertisers had paid Meta $13,600 to display these ads. One ad was purchased by a conservative student group called Turning Point USA, and it featured a tweet from Candace Owens stating she has no patience for this child groomer movement, and the ad read, "Protect your kids." Another ad from the Dallas Express referred to the anti-trans group Gays Against Groomers as an organization against the sexualization, indoctrination, and medicalization of children. The New Jersey Homedale Republican Party ran an ad asking people to support political candidates who publicly state their opposition to the state's new sex education curriculum, which sexualizes our children to advance the agenda of groomers. Yet another ad by Republican Illinois State Senate candidate Philip Nagel featured him stating that he is fed up and pissed off with the sick perversion that is being pushed on our children by a political class full of pedophiles and groomers. So Meta has been held accountable to the inclusion of these ads, even though those ads run contrary to their policies, and they are going to accept money off of those ads in spite of being held accountable for them.
And this is in contrast to what we faced when we were trying to simply promote our trans content creator summit. Remember when we were doing that, and I put an ad out for that? I mean, we put the thing up on our Instagram, and we were going to promote it to folks just to get the word out a little bit more. That ad was rejected as a social, I forget, yeah, for social reasons, social
Justice
activism
reasons.
or whatever. What's
Yeah.
that?
Social justice.
Yeah, and so our ad was blocked, just talking about an event that we had coming up, whereas this stuff is going through, and it's very, again, very hypocritical and very interesting. I can't wait to see what happens with some of these ads and if they really do crack down on this to follow their own policy. Let's move
Well,
over
again,
to. Oh, go
it
ahead.
comes back down. I want to let me just jump on this for a moment, Emily.
Yeah.
It comes back down to during political season, during election season, any ad is fair game. It doesn't matter how scandalous it is. It doesn't matter how libelous it is. it's still allowed and it's fair game. And so I think Facebook is just following along with the pattern of saying, well, this is an election season. These are just people trying to get a message out about voting, and they're just letting it slide. They're not paying attention to what their policies are in this season because they know they're going to make a dime.
Mhm. So moving on, dozens of Rooster Teeth employees accuse company of toxic work environment. What's going on here?
So originally, this was brought to my attention as a trans employee um, basically called out the digital media company Rooster Teeth for some serious transphobic behavior on part of the company. But right now, there are more people coming out and basically saying that um, there was indeed a lot of just blatantly um, homophobic, transphobic information that was being tossed out. Um, a common point of concern is how overworked and underpaid employees are. Erin Zeck said she was threatened with recasting if she did not accept the wage that was offered her. Jen Brown accused the company of taking advantage of non unionized states like Texas, which allows them to underpay employees. Sam Ireland said it was normal for staff members to work 60 to 100 hours a week with no overtime. So there's a lot of, people coming in to look at, um, look at Rooster Teeth and say, okay, what is really going on with this company? What practices do they have? And so all of the accusations do need to be clearly brought out and dealt with in a real serious way. Rosa is telling us over in chat that the employee who originally came out definitely had some bad faith in their history as well. And that's why I moved on to a broader understanding of the story, because it does look like, while it may have begun with transphobic accusations, if the company has an unhealthy system in the entire company, then it is most certainly needs to be examined and called out as it should be.
Mhm. The Guardian is reporting that ABC News staff hit back at Media Watch over coverage of trans issues. What's going on here?
Okay, so ABC is the Australian broadcasting company, not
Ah,
the American broadcasting company. So this is actually in Australia. An episode of Media Watch, which canvasses whether the Australian broadcast uh, coverage of transgender issues has been influenced by corporate partnerships with LGBT plus communities, has kind of gotten journalists at the broadcasters news division a little upset. Um, Media Watch called on ABC to review its relationship with ACON, a community based organization which grew out of the AIDS crisis and now focuses on health and inclusion issues. The problem here, this Media Watch host says, is a media group partnering with and being rewarded by a lobby group, and how that can lead to perceptions of bias in coverage or to bias itself. So there was concern on Media Watch wanting to make sure that basically ABC was being upfront and honest about any um, lobbying or any contributions or any influence that this lobbying group may have had. ABC is, kind of in a place where it is in a bit of a conflict of interest when it comes to examining itself with regard to this. They participate in ACON's Australian Workplace Equality Index, which measures the impact of inclusion in organizations. The ABC said it won 3 inclusion awards and retained the title of Gold Employer for the second consecutive year. So there's definitely some concern about whether or not they are able to be unbiased in their reporting on transgender issues. So Media Watch is just calling them out and saying, look, are you doing all you can to present a fair, unbiased presentation of news when it comes to transgender issues? And some of the reporters are saying, look, we do our job, and that was basically, we print the stories as they come. You're muted, Em.
A beauty products brand was accused of erasing women for interviewing a trans woman. What is the detail behind this story?
So Ulta, who has a history of being very trans inclusive, decided to interview TikTok influencer Dylan Mulvaney on one of their podcasts. And Dylan is very popular on TikTok and has really risen quickly in TikTok stardom, only having begun her transition about 230 days ago. And I know this because she starts most of her videos with, or most of her daily videos with, day such and such of transition. So she was invited to be on Ulta's podcast series and was just being, asked questions about her life and transition. What happened though is that commenters accused Ulta of erasing womanhood and accusing Dylan of doing woman face, which again um, goes back to the practice of blackface. Well, now they've appropriated that and adjusted it to say it's woman face whenever a transgender woman is going out in public with presentation. Um, so this has really launched a backlash um, against Ulta in conservative groups because they were allowing a transgender woman to misrepresent women according to their perspective on that. But then at the same time, there has been some accolades given to Ulta where people are saying thank you for doing this thing and allowing a transgender woman to be representative of the community on in your product brand.
I'm dying to follow up on this one and see what happens from this, because it's just so sad that there's these backlashes happening against companies that are positive, showing positive things, are doing good things to represent everybody in
Yeah.
all stories, all experiences, and yeah, they're just getting this backlash. So hopefully it doesn't affect them in a great way, because Ulta's a good place. Moving on to a fun one, let's get into video games. Apex Legends' new trans hero, created alongside Glad, is voiced by a trans actor. There's so much good in this. I love it.
So ever since we've invited people to send in suggestions for or news stories for the show, there has not been one particular news story that I have gotten slammed so much by more than this story right here. I got I mean, it came from everywhere. It came from TikTok. It came from the Transverse Discord. It came from the moderators. It was coming at me left and right that Apex Legends has a trans character. And I wanted to go a little bit beyond just the basic information, of what this is about. That they've introduced a trans character, like we did with Fortnite. We talked about the skin when the Dreamer skin was introduced, and now they've introduced a couple of others that seem to be trans or at least gender nonconforming. But Catalyst will join the League of LGBTQ plus heroes. Um, Catalyst, whose real name is Tressa Smith, um, has a power set that allows her to, them to contribute to defense. But the interesting thing about this is that trans voice actor Melly Grant is the one who does the voice of Catalyst. So not only do we have trans representation in the character, but we have trans representation in the voice actor who provides the voice to the character. Um, Also, Respawn Entertainment worked closely and carefully with consultants from GLAAD, which is the media monitoring organization for protecting LGBTQ plus representation, and the company's transgender employees to make sure that Catalyst respectfully represented the community. Now, the funny thing is that I was listening to our friend Marla talking about the release of this character, and she's like, listen, Respawn, make this character just so OP that everybody will want to play them because they're going to look at a trans character and they're going to say, oh no, I don't want to do that. But make this thing the strongest, baddest ass character on the fucking game, and everybody will want to play a trans character.
I'm all about that. I love that. That's great. What a great article. I love all the things about this. I'm so excited for that. I love jumping into this follow-up article here. Graham Norton receives outpouring of support from the LGBTQ plus community after being hounded off of Twitter.
So we've been following a little bit of back and forth on Graham Norton over the last few weeks, partly because I love Graham Norton, and so, but also Graham Norton took a little bit on the chin for trans people. Now, as I've said before, Graham Norton is a very out gay man, and typically doesn't get into a lot of public discourse over trans issues, but Graham Norton was speaking at the Cheltenham Literature Festival and was asked about his comments regarding John Cleese and cancel culture and J.K. Rowling. So when the discussion turned to trans rights, Graham Norton said simply, talk to trans people, talk to the parents of trans kids, talk to doctors, talk to psychiatrists, to someone who can illuminate this in some way. Now, J.K. Rowling took offense, and Twitter just began a tirade against Graham Norton. But after a swell of anti-trans efforts to, pull Graham out of the Twitter sphere, there was a pushback from those who chose to stand with Graham Norton and thanked him for his comments. That's the hashtag I stand with Graham Norton emerged to basically say, you know what? His comments weren't bad. They were just practical and good sense. So there's been this swell of support for Graham, and hopefully we'll see him, continue to speak with that mild and common sense approach to things when asked about trans issues.
Good. Trans people can now easily update their gender with the Social Security Administration in the United States. That is awesome. What's going on here?
So in the first part of the year, we talked about how the Social Security Administration had now been offering non-binary gender markers on your Social Security account. Well, a press release that's went out recently now says that you don't even have to bring in documentation to show your gender marker. You can self-identify, and the Social Security Administration will update your Social Security records showing your gender identity as you self-identify. And so if you need to do your Social Security update and you need to get, your Social Security information all up to date with your transition, you can now do that without any effort or paperwork. Just go to your local Social Security Administration office and ask them to work on updating your records.
Wonderful, wonderful news. That I think that should help really simplify the process for a lot of people. That's
Yeah.
great. All right, unless you have anything else to add, Genevieve.
I did want to bring up one thing, and that was a follow up with Dylan Mulvaney.
Okay.
I need to find the information, but if anybody can if anybody has the opportunity to beat me to it, Dylan Mulvaney actually sat down with President Biden. She was invited to come to the White House and speak with President Biden. That was um, that was hosted by Now This News,
Mhm.
and so you can go check out the interview with Dylan. Hang on, I'll grab this link, drop it in the doodly doo, and see what she had to say to President Biden on the issue of trans rights.
Wonderful. Well, I think that does it for our show. Thank you
Yeah.
all so much for coming. Thank you so much for the raid, Mush Tomb. Really appreciate it. I guess it's more mush tomb, right? Not mush, but like a mushroom. Got it. Thank you so much for the raid. Thank you all so much for coming and watching the show. I hope you enjoyed it for the first time. For Genevieve Bergman, for Kari Aiden in the production booth, I'm Emily Michelle, wishing you good night and good news. Thank you, everybody.